Are you ready to get casual? Grab your favorite adult beverage or combustible plant and join us for our roundtable TTRPG discussion. Oh yeah, it's time for Casual Friday. And now, here are your hosts.
What's up, everybody? We are here getting the weekend started early on Casual Friday. I am Ryan Doyle from the Verdigris Table. Our typical co-hosts are deep inside of Faye Muncie. Jim somehow convinced Brad to come help him try to lead this revolution to overthrow a hag. And either it's not going well, we're not quite sure yet. Time behaves differently when you swap realms. So I went down to my local game shop and I found these guys. What's up? Introduce yourselves to the fine folks at home. We'll start with Pat.
Oh, sure. I'm Pittsburgh Pat. I was here a week or so ago, and this was a blast, and Ryan invited me back. I have a YouTube channel named Pittsburgh Pat, and I talk about all kinds of stuff, but lately it's been almost all D&D, and we're all about the 2024 rules, and I teach newcomers to D&D. I teach kids in school, after school, and Adventure League. So there you go.
Yeah. Hey, how's it going? I'm Lucas. I have a YouTube and Twitch channel at Kelf1. You can also find me at kelfscorner.com. And I do video games and also a lot of D&D stuff. I run 3 games. 2 of them are streamed on Twitch. And yeah, I just kind of talk a lot about D&D. It is a lot in my life. As I think it is with both of you guys.
Yeah, I talk about D&D is what we're here to do. Occasionally, we will talk about things that are not D&D. So I wanted to highlight, not that it needs any help, really. Look at numbers go up as we speak.
Wow.
Terry Pratchett's Discworld is coming to the TTRPG space. I know not everyone's familiar with Terry Pratchett. It's sci-fi fantasy. It can be pretty intimidating because my man wrote 40 some odd books.
I've heard things get. I heard that you get really hooked by book 5. I just can't do it.
There's a bunch of different ways to get involved. So if you haven't read Discworld, you don't have to start with one. One is The Color of Magic and is very good and a good place to start. But there's a lot of freestanding, episodic ways to jump in. It's all very fun and lighthearted. And you'll read a pun and be like, oh my, it must have taken this guy 3 hours to come up with that. How is that the dumbest, smartest thing I've ever read? Very much lends itself to TTRPGs. So I personally am looking forward to this one. I'm a huge fan. Just the built-in comedy and then sucker punched with poignancy every so often. I haven't done the deep dive on this one because I am on a Kickstarter supporting hiatus. Christmas is coming, and so are many Kickstarters that haven't delivered yet. So I did not back it, full disclosure.
You know what though, Ryan, I want to make a point about that. Backing random Kickstarters is like having Christmas all year round because you just randomly get stuff in the mail that you forgot that you backed like a year and a half ago.
Valid. Yeah. Support small and medium-sized creators as much as we're going to talk about the big 500-pound gorilla in the room. Back some other stuff. There's a million cool games out there. And yeah, sometimes the waiting makes it so much better.
Yeah.
We're too big. There we go.
That was kind of cool, actually.
Who let this monkey control the buttons?
The color. What color is the color of magic? I like that title because that is something I'll say at the table a lot of times, especially to the newcomers. Like, well, you cast Witch Bolt. What color is that Witch Bolt? Personalize this stuff. Make it happen for you. And it's draw them in. Color is a good way to do that.
Flavor's free.
Mm-hmm.
Flavor is free. Yes. So to our main point of this month, the Dungeon Master's Guide is coming. In fact, some people have the Dungeon Master's Guide in hand already. Not us.
No.
Hey,
I've seen people talk about the PDFs. You mean the actual book?
Yeah, I heard that.
The NDA just lifted.
Yeah, Ted. I was watching Ted from Nerd Immersion. He's been going over a lot of it.
Ted has it. Ginny D has it. I'm sure a couple of the other big players. Everyone's being real careful about what they're putting on the screen after the last kerfuffle featuring everybody's favorite Goon Squad, the Pinkertons. And it's taking out notice. Loved it. What we learned, or at least I learned this week, is that this is actually going to be the last time Chris Perkins is a lead on a book.
Oh,
In this article, talking about how there's a bunch of cool people involved in the DMG. It mentions that Chris Perkins is going to. It doesn't talk about him stepping down or retiring or anything, and he does talk about contributing to the Monster Manual and the new starter set, but this is his last project as lead.
dang! I did not hear that.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on Perkins? He gets lumped in with Crawford, and I know it's hard to separate, the creatives from the corporate nonsense sometimes, but
Chris talks like a writer, like
Yeah.
when he talks, he sounds to me like one of my creative writing classmates at college. Like he gets excited, he gets geeked out about like what the ideas is, and I like that he hints at the process. He hints at like, okay, we had this much space, so we were gonna like, and he tries not to give too much away, but sometimes he does, and he says things like. We were, we only had 20 pages, so we couldn't do all the lore. We had to do like a kind of a overarch, like everybody gets a paragraph kind of thing. And, but yeah, I don't know if that's me like reading into it or seeing through it, but I like his enthusiasm.
I'm kind of the same thing. I appreciate the fact that I guess I kind of see him as both the designer and also because I was watching Ack Inc. for a little while. So I kind of see him in both of those roles where he's the game designer, but he's also like just a great dungeon master. And seeing how he kind of plays both of those roles and the way that he presents information, I think he has. I think he's been a good influence on on the system. And he's been around since 3rd edition, if I'm not mistaken. So I mean, he's had a long time to really get good at this craft. And him and Jeremy Crawford and Todd Kenrick, like those three are like the faces of D&D to me. Like when I think of when I think of Wizards, there's that corporate entity that's obviously looming overhead, like some malevolent lich. But then I think about Chris Perkins and Jeremy Crawford and Todd Kenrick, who are just like, hey, these are the guys that I know I can trust, and I just love seeing their videos together.
I really like Todd Kendrick's energy. He came over from D&D Beyond, and I think that's why they bought D&D Beyond, was to get him.
Oh yeah.
He's just clearly bringing that geek out energy to all of these interviews that he's been running to introduce all the new stuff, and that's his role, and he is good at it.
Yeah. He has an excellent way of selling stuff. Like he asks excellent questions. He is able to elicit good answers and responses out of the people that he's talking to, and just seeing his chemistry with the creators is always great. I had an opportunity. I met him at PAX U last year and got him to sign my autograph scroll, and he was very humble about it. He's like, "Why do you want my signature?" I'm like, "You're the face of D&D to me, buddy."
We got a Wild Brad appearing.
Yo, what's up?
He's actually in Cabo. I was trying to make him sound more heroic.
Oh, jeez.
Jim is actually in Faye Muncie, for those paying attention at home. But Brad's on vacation, and I was jealous, so I lied about it.
Who wouldn't be?
Yeah, really. Oh man.
And yeah, it is kind of easy to forget because he's been maybe overshadowed by some other big names like Mercer and Brendan Lee Mulligan. But Perkins is kind of the godfather of actual play.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. I mean, I think you're 100% right. When you think of actual plays, you think of Critical Role, you think of Dimension 20, but I mean, they were kind of the first ones from the official vein.
Yeah. Good stuff. So we got Todd Kendrick sitting down with Perkins and Mr. Wyatt talking about one element that I think Lucas is probably pretty excited about. Or maybe not. Maybe Lucas doesn't need this part of it.
No. When I saw this video, my heart immediately pined for my early days of learning D&D and spending hours upon hours on wiki sites. And I'm like, this right here is, while it's sorely needed in today's D&D world, boy oh boy, wiki sites, hold on to your pants.
Yeah, even during watching this video, they were hinting at the fact that there's contradictions sometimes in the lore, and that's okay. And I think one of the reasons they talked about how they purposely kind of gave each, maybe, like, say they're talking about Xanathar, right? They give you like a paragraph about Xanathar. They're talking about Tiamat. They're going to give you a paragraph. They're intentionally kind of leaving it open for DMs to like invent their own, just giving them like a little bit of hint here or there and like letting them run with it and not saying like that anything is wrong or that sort of thing. So it's useful to, it's going to be really useful for somebody like me or, who I took years off, of D&D in between versions, right? So, when I picked it back up with 5e, there was a lot of stuff that was new to me, or newer. So like when Spelljammer came out in 2022, I was like, "Ooh, this is cool, D&D in space." People were like, "Oh yeah, this is a retread of blah 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 blah," and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I knew that. No, I didn't know that." So it's I think it's gonna be useful to fill in some of the gaps in my lore, and my recommendation is, don't be embarrassed by what you don't know, because there's 50 years worth of stuff here. It's like Terry Pratchett, right? Like at the beginning, like, if you don't have time to read all those books, that's okay, but you can still pick up some things and throw them into your campaign. And this is a great way to do it, I think.
Absolutely. And the fact that I think the lore glossary is going to play kind of similarly to how the rules glossary is in the new player's handbook, where it's going to be that it's going to be that go-to de facto reference when you're in the middle of something, you're prepping a session, or one of your players brings something up like, what is adamantine? And it's going to be that thing that you can go to, versus what I have done for the last 10 years is I open up a new Chrome tab and I type in D&D wiki adamantine and I look for the first one that's on the fandom site and try to jump at it. So, the fact that they're saying like, hey, we're going to include all this lore. We're going to include stuff about the gods, stuff about the planes, stuff about, elements and materials. I'm all for it. This is one of the best things I've heard, and I just hope it's as well done as the rules glossary in the player's handbook.
One feature I have mixed feelings about is I'm mostly excited about it, but there is now going to be a pronunciation guide.
Oh yeah,
in this lore glossary, which I was super pumped about until I learned that the god of the orcs is Groomsh.
Groomsh, yeah.
Nah,
Yeah.
Groomsh, man. Like, come on. And so I still reserve the right to mispronounce all of the fantasy words.
I used Grumsh in a campaign that I ran, and my first pronunciation of it was Grummish. And that was, I always imagined like orcs, orcs be like Grummish, and it's, but yeah, I mean, that's always going to be a factor. I mean, it's all fantasy words, it's all made up. I want to know their official pronunciation of Pelor. The god of the sun, because Pelor is one of my favorite gods of all time, and I've heard Pelor, I've heard Pelor, I've heard Pelor. I want to know. That's the one that I'm diving for.
I'm Team Pelor.
Same, yeah. Yeah.
Well, Ryan, in our campaign on Tuesday, you were talking about Iuz, so I finally got to see how that was spelled. And I put an O in it for some reason. I thought it was like IOU Z, but apparently it's IUZ on the Greyhawk map, which I don't want to jump too far forward. But yeah, so standardizing pronunciations, that, I don't know, that could be interesting. But I recently did, I did actually Waterdeep Dragon Heist for Adventure League, and I did the first scene, but it's a one shot, so I collapsed it. So they mentioned Xanathar, but you don't get to see him. And I'm like, oh, no. We got to have a big baddie here at the beginning, right? So, like, let's throw Xanathar in there. And there's a lot of potential for mispronunciation of Xanathar, I think, in the way that's spelled. But maybe I'm not pronouncing that right. But throwing, so what I did, and this will tie back into the lore glossary, just give me a second. And so I threw Xanathar in there, I threw the bartender from the Yawning Portal in there, and I threw Volo in there. So I had, you get three heavy hitters of the lore in there to show these new players, like, what's what, and each one has a distinct personality, and I did each one of them with a different accent. So I did like Xanathar with this kind of high-pitched German accent, and I had now I can't remember his name, the Yawning Portal bartender, Durnan. He was French, so he was saying things like, Xanathar, you cannot come into my bar, and Volo he seemed Italian to me for some reason because of his dress, that sort of thing. It seemed like a kind of a Swiss Guard, kind of Vatican-looking thing with his puffy hat and sort of thing. So I thought, okay, he'll be Italian. But you could do that, right? So you could go to this lore glossary, you could pick three names at random and say, okay, how do these three personalities, where do they intersect, right? And that could be a fun little idea for a one-off or a campaign start or something like that.
Yeah.
I am going to get spicy here and ask you to pronounce this word that Nacho is saying that the people are can't pronounce.
I don't want I know that it's supposed to, I know that it's sigil, but I will never not call that sigil.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
There's no world in which I'll look at that and pronounce it sigil.
Sigil is the place. I have just recently come around to being like, okay, fine. You can differentiating between sigil is the not proper noun, like the thing, the emblem, the symbol is sigil. Come on, it's GIF. Come at me,
right,
chat.
If I hadn't watched that video, the video on the lore, I would not have known that was pronounced with hard G. Phil's got an interesting question. He says, how important is it to, there you go. Do you all think it is to have common history playing the same adventures as part of the zeitgeist?
I think it's helpful, but not necessary. And I think a lot of dungeon masters get intimidated by it. Because, circling back to what Pat was saying earlier, there's 50 years of multiple people across multiple editions and multiple media, right? Like, you want to talk about, how many Drizzt books are there? I've only read 5, 6 of them. I'm a casual fan, like I haven't read most of Salvador. I read 6 novels. Like, there's so much content out there. And I think everybody's afraid. I think there's a lot less of that, like, nerd flex going on in the year of our Lord 2024. But I think a lot of us who have been around for a while are maybe wary of it, anxious for it to come out of the woodwork somewhere, and someone to be like, haha, you don't know all of the details of all of this nerd hobby. So I think it's a great asset. I think it's a really cool tool to have. And it sounds like, again, we don't have the books in our hands yet because we're not special, but it sounds like they're taking the right level of resolution with it all. Like, here's 3 sentences, not here's 300 pages.
Right. I mean, and that is a factor, because kind of like I mentioned before, and previously, anytime you wanted to know if something mentioned, Thurisden or Tharizdun, as they said in the video, you'd have to go and look it up on your own. You'd have to go and look up the Elder Elemental Eye. You'd have to, do the research on your own. So having something that is simple, that is digestible, that you can very quickly grab from the back of the book to just give you the springboard. And if you want to look more into it, you can always explore the other resources. But at the end of the day, having a common collective that, all the adventurers and the players can agree on, at the end of the day, that's dependent on the DM. If the DM says that, all the gods are dead, well, then the rules glossary about the gods is kind of fluff at that point. Maybe it was before that moment, and, or maybe they've yet to come, but the gods at that point and anything related to them doesn't matter in the back of the book. Or your DM could just say adamantine doesn't exist, or dwarven steel doesn't exist. So that entry in the lore glossary doesn't really matter.
Well, it's kind of like when somebody, says, hey, we're fighting goblins. Goblins only have 5 hit points, or kobolds. Kobolds only have, it's like, well, maybe not this one, right? So, just because that's in the stat block doesn't mean that, like, there isn't variation among, not every human has, 20 hit points. Yeah. So, it's like, I mean, for me, but I have to admit, what Ryan was talking about, the intimidation factor, that was a thing. So like a couple years ago when I started doing so-called official DMing with Adventure League DMing in a game store, I didn't want to get it wrong, but at some point somebody, came up to me and said, just let it go, man. Like, you're never going to be able to study for this. Like, somebody's always going to know more. And if a player at the table knows more, that's fine. But like, you're the DM, run the game. And, unfortunately, in my old age, I'm starting to get less and less concerned about what other people think, and embracing like possible failure in order to have a good time. So, yeah, if I put myself out there and I say Xanathar's red and he's actually blue on the cover, big deal. I'm okay with that. It's not a big deal.
And again, in your campaign, Xanathar is red, and there you go. Because as the game runners have always said, the dungeon master has the final say.
I like Wizards and Warp Drive's comment where he says it's deliberately sigil is deliberately meant to be able to be mispronounced by locals and tourists, right? So that's like the Primanti brothers thing, right?
Yeah.
What was the Ben Affleck movie? We said Primanti brothers.
Oh yeah.
It was
so
like,
the word. There's a word for this, which I cannot, I'm not confident pronouncing, but shibboleth. A shibboleth is a thing that, like, the insiders know how to say and the outsiders mispronounce. So sigil is a shibboleth.
I love it.
You're an Adventures League DM.
Yeah.
Has playing published adventures replaced the connection through novels read?
Honestly, I have to be honest. I don't read the novels. So, I pick and choose. I'm an Adventure League DM in name only. I take the modules as a suggestion.
Yes.
And then I build from there. So, if I were at a convention, I would run the module as the module is written. But being a writer and being critical of writing, I can't help it. It's just the way I was trained. You know, so my degree was in. So I try to improve what I find. You know, I like try to collapse the fiction. Here's what happens. Usually, I think that modules are written and these books are written like Dragon Heist or whatever, are written to give people a lot of ideas. But a lot of times, I'm trying to run 2.5 hours, and these are 4-hour long scripts. So I'm cutting it down. So I'm basically like, I just watched a documentary on the making of Caddyshack. When they came out of the first cut of Caddyshack, they had so many jokes they didn't want to get rid of. It was a 4-hour long movie. Well, obviously, that's not what we ended up with. So collapsing the fiction, collapsing the narrative usually makes it better, right? And so that's what I try to do with a lot of these pre-written adventures, is I take the elements and then I try to make it more intense, you know, like take the best parts.
Yeah. I'll say I'm very simple. I mean, I run a lot of published modules. And I mean, I think I've read a lot of the novels, but honestly, just making everything your own and just kind of running with it, just seeing wherever it goes. Cause I mean, every group's going to be different no matter what module you run.
And that's kind of the best part. That's why I like running pre-published content. One, because I think the line between homebrew and pre-published is a lot blurrier than people who run pure homebrew for the last decade think. No one's running straight from the book, or few people are. I should say that. But it is nice to have this common experience that you can share. You meet someone down at the game shop or whatever on an internet forum, and you've both run Phandalin. It's interesting how your experiences were similar and different, what your players did, what my players did. Or, I mean, that same goes true for players. So we've both been to Ravenloft, right? That's a cool common ground that we can share.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've run the Lost, or not the Lost Mines, Dragon of Ice Spire Peak I've started 2 campaigns using that module and have run it as just like one-shot adventure for players who just want to try D&D. And of the 5 times that I have done that, I have had 5 different outcomes in just the first adventure alone, where the players are going to the local mill and they come across, you know, the handmaiden that needs rescued from a manticore. It's like, I've had so many different outcomes with that. It's like, where the story would progress beyond that is just up to the players.
Absolutely. Same thing with Horde of the Dragon Queen. You know, running that first adventure in Greenest. Although I have to say, almost invariably, one of the newbies always wants to jump on the adult blue dragon, you know, just like jump on its back. And I'm like, all right, give me an acrobatics check. Let's see what happens here, you know, but like, you know, if that's what you want to do. But yeah, why not?
Backup character.
Let them do it, you know? Let
that's
them find out how lethal. I'm like, this thing is spitting lightning at, like, you know, ramparts and taking out rows of archers. But you want to jump on it. All right, sure.
Yeah, I'll allow it. So speaking of that, like, common framework, we are going back to Greyhawk.
Ooh.
Oh, be still my beating heart.
I know this is one of Ryan's favorite scenes.
I just like variety. You know, I am not a dyed-in-the-wool like Greyhawk, Grognard. I just give me new stuff. In fact, I was kind of disappointed to see in the release schedule a pair of books on the Forgotten Realms, because I thought we were like diving deep into Greyhawk. But we are only getting Greyhawk in the Dungeon Master's Guide, as far as I know so far, as far as anybody knows. But we're getting 30 pages of it. I double-checked that. It's like 32 to 35 pages of the new DMG is using Greyhawk kind of as a framework to show new dungeon masters and perhaps experienced dungeon masters how to go about creating world building without driving yourself mad and including a million details that your players might never engage with, which is a common pitfall that I think the earlier version of this book had dove into for most. Start with the Pantheon and the creation myth, I think, is not a good way to do it. Start with the starting town. And it seems like they got the message, and Perkins took a little more editorial control over the organizational structure of the book. And yeah, we're getting Greyhawk, baby.
Yeah, the moment they announced that, what, because obviously in the UA stuff they announced that the DMG was going to have a campaign setting, and that it was going to be something where they can kind of illustrate how DMs can structure things and how they can do their own. And when they announced that it was Greyhawk, I about leapt out of my seat, because the very first campaign that I ever ran was a homebrew one based on a book series, but the first campaign that I ever based in a setting, in a official campaign setting, was Greyhawk. And I took my players all across the world of Greyhawk for this huge adventure that spanned from like the bright desert up to the mountains by White Plume Mountain, and like Kalundi, and the near div, the lake. And I had so much fun researching that entire setting. And I remember working at my job and going on the Wikipedia and the fandom sites and looking up locations and settlements and I was like, oh, there's a gold dragon that sits in the foothills of this place, and they deliver him coal every now and again. And it's like, oh, good, that'll be a nice little adventure when they get there. And just absolutely am so excited to see Greyhawk in any capacity, and having a new generation of players and DMs getting to see it, and thus letting Greyhawk continue to live and breathe, as what it, as more adventures come out.
Give me maps, lots of maps,
Yes.
Lots of maps.
I'm looking at maps. I could look at maps all day, and like, I don't know if you guys remember the computer RPG Ultima, the Ultima series. They would give you a cloth map in the box, like the physical box, and it was, it's like, here's an artifact, like here's giving my players something to touch, something like physical, like just. I have players that have, they're like 10 years later, they're like, oh, remember that time when you cut up that piece of, burlap, and you like put like goblin like script on it and you gave it to us? I still have that. And I'm like, oh, really? So like, that kind of stuff. The fold out maps, like in Candlekeep, like, it shows you like where the Great Library is. It shows you the Court of the Air, those kinds of things. Even like in Candlekeep, I just ran Joy of Extra Dimensional Spaces. The way Fistandia's mansion is, laid out, that makes it so much easier to run. The amount of imagination that I got just watching that video and seeing that map, I'm like, oh my gosh. Well, Ayuz, for instance, I know how to pronounce. There's a location for the entrance for the Tomb of Horrors, right? So like, that's beautiful, like, who's going to dare to go there? So I'll take you down the, a murderous dungeon run by an, demi-lich, no problem. We can do that. I mean, it's, I don't know. I mean, I begin a lot of my adventures with the world map of the Sword Coast, just to give people an idea of where they are geographically. For me, it makes it real, it makes it grounded. If somebody tells me I'm at Phandalin and this is Phandalin, here's what Icewind Dale is. Even the movie, when they did Honor Among Thieves, and they break out of the prison and then they pull back and they show the map. What a wonderful touch that was. I mean, that was a lovingly made movie by people who had some input, who had played D&D. You could just tell, And that's the kind of imaginative kick I want. People have that cinematic feel, And sometimes the overhead view, that bird's eye view, is satellite view, I guess, is pretty cool.
All of my favorite stories start with a map. This is worth talking about because it's not all sunshine and rainbows. A lot of what was new in the PHB turned out not to be that new, and it's not the first time they pulled that trick. With TTRPG's Academy's talking about how, based on Spelljammer, that this is going to be a rehash, and I think that's accurate. But I've been trying to practice reminding myself lately in the last few conversations that the DMG is a tool for new dungeon masters, especially.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of people who came. I mean, most people came in during 5th edition, right? So there was zero Greyhawk. Well, actually, that's not true. They were playing Greyhawk and not realizing it in Tales from the Yawning Portal, Infinite Staircase, Saltmarsh right now is in Greyhawk that we're playing. So like Greyhawk's been there, but they didn't have any context. So now they have access to it. We're going to learn a lot. I hope it's been gone. I'm sure it's been gone over for like sensitivity issues, but I hope it's been gone over for like creativity issues as well.
Right.
I'm hoping for like new good stuff, and we have been sold some old okay stuff and told it's new good stuff. But I'm still pretty hopeful for these 30 pages of the DMG, 30 some odd pages that are going to cover Greyhawk.
Which, I mean, arguably, even the way that they describe it, it is a rehash for sure. As TTRPG Academy said, it's just little bits and pieces of information, more centralized around, the free city of Greyhawk, with bits and pieces about the neighborhoods, the areas within the town, or within the city itself, and then bits and pieces as you go out. So if you want to explore more, if you want to, dig deeper into the outer areas, you have that. I mean, there's a website that I still have bookmarked to this day in my Greyhawk folder, which is AnnaBMeyer.com. And they still on there, they just had the virtual Greyhawk convention back on October 3rd through the 6th. I mean, there is still a big community around Greyhawk, but she has maps upon maps of Greyhawk atlases and, the city maps, and ones where they're categorized and labeled. So, I mean, there is still a huge swath of information that people can pull from that I don't necessarily think Wizards would have to come up with a bunch of new stuff for it. Like you said, it's mainly going to be for new players.
Yeah, during the video they emphasized the city map, and they showed us the city map of the city of Greyhawk, and and that's fun. It's fun to have those places where you can invent your adventure. So like 3 different taverns. There's like the different quarters of the town. This Thursday coming up, I'm going to run a Liar's Night session at Adventure League. And so there's a map that came with Spelljammer. Somebody mentioned Spelljammer in the comments, and they show you the Rock of Brawl. So I just picked a tavern there that's run by a beholder, and so we're gonna have a costume party, and we're just gonna like have a Halloween party, and the proprietor owners. I found that out later. I was looking for, last year when I ran this the first time, I was looking for a tavern to set it in, and I was going to do the tavern that's, the Yawning Portal. But then somebody said, well, if you're going to like riff on Adventure League, you need to do something with Spelljammer. I said, okay, I'll do that. I found this tavern. Then I went into the lore, and I found out this is perfect. There's a friendly beholder who owns this place, and and he has so I made it up, he has a tradition where he has you on Liar's Night, you tell the best story, right? So you tell your favorite adventure. Not that you're lying, you're exaggerating the truth, but fits in. And then he judges whether or not you deserve a magical item, if you tell the best story. So anyway, all that was inspired by a map. That was inspired by me looking at the Spelljammer map. So now you have this Greyhawk map. It's gonna be, and then you got the lore in the book as well. So it's right there. It's ready made for, people to like start drawing their own dungeon maps and their own city maps and towns.
Pat, share the name of that adventure because it is free right now, at least on the Dungeon Masters Guild, right?
Oh, so this is one I made up, but
okay.
but yeah, there is a free one on DMG Guild Dungeon Masters Guild. It is the horror at the fuzzy farm. I don't know. That one was, I read that one, but what they also have though for free download is they have some Liar's Night specific monsters that are pretty cool. So they have like a peppermint dragon. So you have like a dragon that breathes cold damage, but it smells like peppermint, right? So
that's awesome.
Yeah, pretty cool.
My new favorite dragon.
Yeah, exactly.
The Altoid.
Is it Fuzzy-Tail
yes.
Farm? Fuzzy-Tail Farm and the
That's
Frightful Candy Goat Massacre?
That's it, the massacre at Fuzzy-Tail Farm. And they're saying, oh, it's for kids. But when you read it, it's not for kids. There's like dismembered candy goats, and they're trying to put them back together. And I'm like, this isn't for kids. But but anyway, yeah. So I'm gonna do something else slightly off.
I don't know if there's a Mr. Welch in the house right now, but if you want Mystara, he's the man to talk to. And yeah, it's true. A lot of people know and love Greyhawk from 3rd edition. There's folks out there who know it because they were there when the magic was written. So this is a homecoming for a lot of people, and this is a new introduction for a lot of people, and it's hard to balance both sets of interests between them sometimes and remember that is the objective here. And as much as I complain about what they do a lot, I think it's also important for me to represent when I think they're doing a good job balancing those interests of a bunch of different kinds of players and dungeon masters. There's generations of people playing this game right now with 0 to decades of experience. So it's not an easy task to make everybody happy. I think they could do a better job. It's not making us unhappy, but it's a big audience that they're trying to appeal to, and that benefits all of us. The more people who are digging it, who are into this game, who are showing up to game night, curious at an Adventures League table at your friendly local game shop, or cruising around online trying to find out like what is this thing. Also, yes, if we're talking about free resources, Mr. Welsh wrote and is, I believe, coming out with I don't know if he's quite calling it a 2nd edition, but there's a revision coming soon. Support creators who make awesome stuff, especially giant awesome stuff, but you can get a whole other setting if you want. Just track down Mr. Welch's Mystara book. It's dope. Mystara is cool too if you want to get back to like the old ways. It's a little more gonzo is maybe too strong of a word for it, but if you're looking for variety, that's another good place to go. There's a pink bubblegum dragon, Twin Steel says.
Never got into Mystara. I have the books, but
last year there was a candy corn monster. There was a jack-o'-lantern that had like stalks for arms, and it had candy corn teeth, and if it bit you, you got poison damage in the form of a sugar rush, right?
Nice.
Yeah, so that was kind of cool. Nice flavor. And if you did a investigation check or perception check, you would, before he was ready to transform into his actual form, he is disguised. You could smell pumpkin spice in the air. So that was a little bit of nice flavor, you know.
Circling back to Dungeon Masters Guild, as a Dungeon Masters Guild creator, they'll let anybody in. But
No, man, you wrote a book for crying.
we were
Yeah.
informed. This is not on the Dungeon Masters Guild. But other cool stuff. Hey, buy my stuff. I like money. But the Dungeon Master Guild's creators were informed that Greyhawk is now on the table. So we may actually see a wave of independent creators making a lot of content for Greyhawk, be it adventures or source books or anything and everything in between, subclasses, who knows. So they just blew the doors wide open. Until recently, you could not publish content based on Greyhawk material on the Dungeon Masters Guild or elsewhere without incurring the wrath of some copyright lawyers. But coming soon to Dungeon Masters Guild, a bunch of people are going to be making Greyhawk content. So
That's awesome.
there will be more.
That's awesome. And you know, there's one of the nice things about Greyhawk is that because it is so, I don't want to say old. It puts the wrong connotation on it. But because it has been around for so long, there is so many resources for it that I can't wait to see what is done with these, and just getting this chance once again to go back to that world. I cannot wait.
Well, Chris Perkins was mentioning that in a sense, the storied, the progeny, the background of the setting, and when they went back to look at it in order to update it, he said there were a lot of the wargaming fingerprints on the text, where he mentioned things like, well, this region has 1,000 foot soldiers, and this one has 3,000 foot soldiers and 500 cavalry, and this has. So it reminded me of the stories that I heard of how D&D came out of like European Napoleonic warfare gaming, and then somebody said, hey, what if you could be one of those soldiers? And that's kind of how the idea of like the personalized character came in. But it is cool to have that strategic level map too, and also hinted in the video was lore about which nations are historical rivals. So let's say, you know, France and England during like, you know, the Napoleonic era, you know, now not so much, but like, you know, so you find out those kinds of things in the D&D Greyhawk setting that maybe, you know, somebody like me who played D&D early on but didn't get into all of that lore, now you know there's going to be easy access to that. So you're going to say like, who's at war with each? Who does it make sense for there to be a conflict with, right?
Yeah. So. And that is some of the information that I'm really hoping is in the campaign setting in the new DMG. Is what are the relationships between some of these places, because that's kind of what it felt like they were alluding to, was giving you just a few little pieces of information about some of the outlying areas that this way you as the DM can go through and, you know, say, okay, well, there's going to be a conflict between, you know, these two places. There's going to be a conflict here between, you know, the elves and the dwarves, and beyond that, there's going to be this down here.
It's always cool to revisit something too, as a reader and as a like creator designer. Like reading the same book that you haven't read for 20 years, like you're gonna have a different experience with that book. You know, their books I read The Great Gatsby every summer for 20 years, and it was always a different experience reading it, you know?
Me too.
So, cool. It's a good one for that. It's a quick one, and it's surprisingly, there's a lot. Whatever. We can stay tuned.
We do a whole different video about Gatsby.
Literature class. But if you go looking at those, like, especially the old like modules, it's like this farmer has 12 copper pieces and a half burnt candle in their nightstand. Like the level of detail sometimes was bananas, and like the things you'd want, like, but that farmer doesn't have a name, you know. So like now to see, even if it is just like a polished up version of the best of all of that material, like that's going to be a cool thing to have, especially if you've never had any of it to start.
Do you do that when you DM? Do you have a list of like 10 NPC names in case somebody wants a name?
I'm a huge advocate of having a list of names ready on your Dungeon Master screen. Like I won't even I'll like assign names to important NPCs, but I have name. It's funny. I don't use a screen right now. I haven't for a long time, but that's like one of the few things like I miss having like literally in front of my face. And in a lot of my like introduction to how to be a DM videos is like, here's one thing that you don't hear enough. Put names on your DM screen.
Personally, I don't, but and this is gonna be a little shout out. Power Word Spill on YouTube has a Chrome extension, or I think Firefox can also get it as well, that is an NPC generator. And what it does is it just lives up in the corner of your Chrome tab. And when you can generate NPC, and it gives you a name, a general description, a description of their voice, their mannerisms, and a potential plot hook. And I have used that so many times since he has put it out, because I have it on my laptop and my PC when I run my various games. And to just be able to click a button and get Blaylon Headstow, a young male dwarf with a buzz cut, short but in a heavy build, and they have a slight tremor in their hands. Their voice is high-pitched yet booming and fast, and says like a lot, but they're very serious about things. So that's where I'll do it. And then sometimes if I need a couple, like if they're going to a tavern or something, there's a button to copy it to the clipboard, and I'll just put it on a document real fast and get like 5 or 6 of them. But yeah, I shout out to Power Word Spill on that, because that extension is a saver.
Nice. I have a deck of cards that has portraits on one side and it has stats on the back. And it has descriptions like that. And that's pretty cool as a visual thing. If you're in person, you can flip them out on the table.
Oh, I would love that.
And yeah, they weren't expensive, but I forget where I got them. And the other thing I do is fastcharacter.com. That is an amazing free in-browser character generator. So if you need to generate NPCs, or if you're teaching kids that don't know how to make characters, they're like, I want to be a Dragon Lord Wizard or Dragonborn Wizard. It's like, sure, I'll do that for next time. Dragonborn Wizard level 3, boom, it'll do it. But the really nice thing about it that I use more than even I use the stats, but it does give you bonds, flaws, motivations, things like that. So it gives you those 4 different things in the corner. And sometimes I'll just use those as an NPC flavoring device. I'm like, okay, why does this person care? Because their sister, ran away from home, or why is this, they're are they greedy? Are they noble? What is their motivation? And it takes some of the brain, you don't have to like tax that creative part of your brain. You can have it like a couple lines right there. And actually, Ryan and I learned a lot from playing Dolmenwood. Is you only need like 3 words.
If they're the right words, yeah.
Use 3 good adjectives. Your players are going to run with it, right?
Yeah, the last year or so of my Dungeon Master career has been just stripping down, learning that less is more, creating more space, and the right amount of prep, the right amount of detail. And that's gonna be different for different people, obviously, but too little is almost better than too much sometimes.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Just recently, I had my in-house group. We had a moment where I didn't know what I was going to do with the group, and an hour or 2 before the session, I had pulled out this box set of an adventure called the Daydream, which is like a never-ending tavern, and it's meant to be played physically. It has a bunch of 4x4, 3x3, and 2x4 tile pieces. And the idea is that the players have keys with numbers on the back of them, and that's how many like doors you can open, and you have you have like so many doors in the room, and no matter what you do, it just opens to a random place. And I was like trying to come up with something about getting one of my players' memories back, and I'm like, this would be a fun way to just have it like random, that I can throw in these memories here and there when they open a door, if they get a lucky roll, or there's 5 or so different kinds of rooms, or 10 different rooms, so roll a d12, and if you get an 11 or 12, you get a memory. And it was really fun. They loved the heck out of it. We ran it for 2 sessions, and it just had really goofy, fun things in it. And it was like I didn't have to prep anything for that. I read through the book like once to see some of the example scenarios, but the surprise of reading a scenario and an encounter to the players as I'm seeing it for the first time was just hilarious.
Yeah, the Dungeon Master is also a player, and forgetting that and not giving yourself the space to have fun and enjoy and maybe be surprised and delighted, I think it's a big cause of burnout. So on the topic of too little being better than too much, I think we're going to call it here. If you're just joining us, there's a ton of awesome insights and a lot of cool free resources in this one. So go back and check this one out. Pittsburgh Pat, Lucas, thank you so much for joining us. Why don't you remind the folks at home where they can find you on the internet and what's going on over there?
I'm pretty much YouTube only, so Pittsburgh Pat on YouTube. See you there.
Yeah, find me on Twitch or YouTube. My YouTube doesn't get updated nearly as much as it should, so generally can find me on Twitch or on Discord.
All right. I hope everybody out there has an awesome weekend, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, everyone.